Hey, welcome back, my friends. My name is Danny Dumas, and this is the Earn Your Title podcast. Every now and then, someone comes into your life that the only word you can use to describe them is amazing. Today, I'm going to tell you about my friend, Chris Wixson. Chris Wixson is someone who you can only describe as amazing. He was the guy that, if he's going to be at the party or he's coming over to your house, you just know you're going to have a good time. I don't remember meeting Chris. I've known him, I feel like, my whole life, but he was 4 or 5 years older than me, and I really started hanging out around my high school years. We didn't go to the same school, but we went to the same church, and he was a snowboarder. He was the cool guy. He would have bonfires at his house, and he would always invite me, and I really felt special because he was the cool guy, and I was the new guy, and he always made me feel very welcome. He was an amazing snowboarder. I did some things snowboarding with him and skiing that were probably pretty reckless and pretty dangerous. Me and him, he took me on my first try where we got kicked out of a ski hill. He was that guy. He would say things like, "Hey, watch this," and you knew whatever he did was going to be amazing. He always drove a really crappy car, but he would give me a ride everywhere we needed to go. Never asked for gas money. And I remember one time we were driving down the road and his hood latch wasn't working right, and his whole hood flipped up, smashed into the windshield, shot his rearview mirror into the back seat. And the dude was just cool. He just, he pulled over, no big deal, didn't freak out. He was just, he was really cool. He's the kind of guy you want to be like. I was there when he met his wife the very first time, and if the kids these days would say he had aura, but his charisma and his ability to talk to girls was truly inspiring. We were skiing, and we got done skiing, and we met up with our church youth group, and they were having a winter retreat, and he was going to be a counselor, and I was still in school age, so I was going to be a camper. But because I was with Chris, and because Chris was cool, I was able to hang out and stay up late. So we were playing euchre, which is the national card game of Michigan. If you don't know how to play euchre, you should. It's an amazing game. And this pretty girl walks in from Florida. She came up with a friend, and she's trying to figure out how to play euchre. We're teaching her the rules, and she said, "I'm going to get something to drink. Does anybody want anything?" And Chris looked at her and said, "If you get me a coffee, I'll love you forever." Well, fast forward multiple years, they got married, and he was a man of his word. And Chris was a good guy. The reason I'm telling you this story today is on Thursday night, Chris died. Chris was an electrician. He was working at an airport, and someone hit him with their car, and he died. And when I heard that story, when I heard it, it felt like a story, right? It felt like it couldn't be true. There's no way that Chris could be gone. I think being close to the same age, you start to go through all the emotions of how this affect my life and how this can affect his wife. And you start feeling all this. And to be very honest with you, this podcast might only be for me. But the reason I'm sharing this in this podcast is, one, I wanted you to know about Chris. I wanted you to know how awesome he was and what a nice guy he was. That he was cool without being a jerk, a friend to everybody. But two, I wanted to remind you, like it reminded me, of how precious life is, how important it is to do it the right way. And while I know Chris didn't plan on this, and this is not what Chris wanted, I know that Chris was living a life that he was able to leave. I'm sure Chris didn't need to tell his wife that he loved her. He didn't need to tell his kids that he loved them. They knew that he was that guy. And so my goal with this podcast today is to encourage you to be that guy that lives a life that's worth it. I think of the fragility of life and how quickly life's taken. And when you're a young man, you kind of feel invincible. And I know Chris felt that way. I watched him do some pretty crazy things while we were skiing. And he definitely had that invincibility feeling. And he inspired me to probably do some things, jump off some things that I wouldn't normally do. But life is pretty fragile. My wife was actually the one that told me, and I could see the concern in her eyes and the sadness in her eyes. She didn't know Chris as well as I did, but she she looks at me, and with my job, we've talked about the danger that I'm in and the dangerous things that I've done. And I feel like I try not to be dramatic and like, yeah, no, I could have died or life or death, whatever. But there's definitely moments where when I get done with a fire, I look back and think man, that was really close. I remember we had one fire. It was a new house, and the city I work in has almost no new houses. I mean, like the newest, we have really old houses, and which is surprisingly, a lot of people don't understand this. It's actually much safer to fight fire in an old house because they're built better. They're built with solid 2x4 construction that's actually 2 inches by 4 inches, and they're overbuilt. Newer houses have glued together plywood and OSB and trusses, and they just fall apart much quicker. And we had a fire in a new construction, and I was on the line, and we were taking it in, and we knew we had a basement fire. And so as we went in, we found the stairs going upstairs. And the way most homes are built, the stairs going to the basement will be right behind the upstairs stairs. So we make our way around the corner. And I remember pulling line and trying to get closer, find these basement stairs. And I remember having this feeling of I was falling forward, like I was leaning forward on the floor. And I didn't put together what was actually happening. And as I actually ran into the wall, and I realized I'm like really falling forward. And it was at that moment I realized that I was being held up by the carpet, that the floor underneath the carpet was gone. It was burned away. So we backed up, we got out, and we actually went outside, cut a hole in the side of the house, and put the fire out from the outside. Fire was out, and we go back in, and I look at what I was doing, and I had crawled over a section of carpeted flooring, and the floor underneath me, the floor trusses were completely gone, and what was holding me up was the tack strip that holds the carpet to the wall. And I just, I wasn't stressed out. I just remember looking at it and going, man, that was really close. Like we were doing something extremely dangerous. And we moved on, and then I think of some, that was dangerous. That was legit. And then I think there's some things that are just dumb that are dangerous. I was at work the other day, and we got a call I'm on the hazmat team, and we have a hazmat truck at our station. We got a call for a unknown substance in an envelope delivered to a political organization. So we went to this other community. We have some pretty high-tech equipment, and they weren't too concerned. They're like, we're pretty sure this is nothing. It's at the police station. It's in the evidence room. So we put our bunker gear on, and we put N95 masks on like you would wear during COVID. Put some gloves on, and my only job was to take the police body camera, and I was going to record all of it for evidence. The FBI were there, the police were there. And as we opened it up, it was a printed card, and in the card was a pack of orange Kool-Aid in the container. And the note said something like, don't drink the Trump Kool-Aid, or don't drink the Trump orange Kool-Aid just because you voted for him doesn't mean you have to keep him in office. Something like that. Somebody hates Trump, whatever. And so we asked the FBI, I'm like, do you want us to test it? She's like, yeah, let's test it, just to make sure. So we several tests. Well, it requires you to open the package. So I have my N95 on, they open the package, and immediately I went, yep, that's orange Kool-Aid. I could taste it. And it was orange Kool-Aid. We tested it. It was citric acid. That's what the chemical came back with. No big deal. And as we were leaving, I just remember thinking, man, I'm glad that wasn't anthrax. In my rush, in our lack of concern, and obviously it was justified, it wasn't real, I hadn't done a good job of sealing up my N95, and I was tasting the product we were testing as a chemical. And, after Chris died, it just made me realize all of the moments in your life that are so close. You're going through a green light and someone runs the red right in front of you. Just barely misses, and you think, man, that was close. But at any one of those moments, it could be too close, and you'd be gone from here. So as you hear the story, and as I think about Chris, I want to think about, am I living a life and being ready to go? Now, I think you should plan for the future. I think you should save money. I think you should have all these, goals and hopes and dreams. But on a day-to-day basis, I think you should be living to die. I think when you get in a fight with your wife, you should apologize. I think you should tell your kids you love them. I think you should take a day off work and pick your kids up from school and take them to the park on a Tuesday. I think you should pick the phone up and call your mom or go to her house and have a cup of coffee with her. If your dad asks you to go fishing, you should go. We are not promised forever. And I feel so sorry for Crystal and the rest of Chris's family that they're not going to get to have them. And I know they're so blessed that they get to live with somebody like Chris. I think part of me doing this is I'm not going to get to talk to him and tell them, but he was such a good guy, and he was the kind of guy that I wanted to be. He's the guy that, motivates me to be a better man. And if I could live like that and live happy and live a joyful life and, be a family man and do the right things and, say that and be nice to the right people, that is what success is like. I could have all the money in the world, but if, my family hates me, what good is it? So if you're hearing this today, I want you to go live a good life. Be the man you've always wanted to be. And if you haven't done that for a really long time, start today. Make a phone call, text your best friend, hug somebody that you haven't hugged in a long time, and live a really good life. I hope this podcast means something to you. I know it means something to me. Chris, you're my friend. I love you and I miss you.